You just saw me driving, got in behind me. I pulled over so you could pass me. That's why I pulled over, because I was driving under the speed limit, and I knew you were trying to find a reason to pull me over. So I pulled over to allow you to pass me, because I'm not breaking any traffic laws.
Well, you did by pulling over.
I absolutely did not, by turning on my turn signal and pulling over.
Yes,
you're saying that it's against the law to turn on your turn signal and safely pull over on the edge of the highway.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. I found a video that kind of caught my attention on YouTube, and it made me consider that making a traffic stop is a little bit like playing Texas Hold'em. Now, I know that sounds kind of crazy, and I'm no expert on Texas Hold'em. So any of you guys out there that are like, super into poker, forgive me. I'm just making a loose analogy, but just hear me out for a second. In Texas Hold'em, you have two cards that you get that are considered like pocket cards that, only you get to see. And then throughout the game, you have rounds of betting. And then throughout those rounds, you have different things that happen. And one of the things that happens is you have something called a flop. And that's where the dealer lays down three cards on the table face up, and everybody gets to build the best hand they can out of that flop. Well, then there's a round of betting, and then there's another round of cards. It's just one card. It's called the turn, and then a round of betting, and then the last card is called the river. And so basically what you do is you try to take your two cards that you have in your hand, your pocket cards, and you try to build the best 5-card hand you can out of the cards you have and the other 5 that eventually come out. So your pocket cards are something that you know that nobody else knows. And that would be, in my mind, the same as the reason for a traffic stop. So if you had like a speeding violation and that was verified by a speed detection device, that might be kind of like having, like a pair of 10s or jacks, like pretty good violation. And then you get an opportunity to go up to the car. The approach to the car would be like the flop, because when you get up to the car, you might find out that in addition to your speeding violation, your, pair of jacks, you also have a jack because you smelled the odor of alcohol, whatever. Right. And then the turn is, well, maybe you get the driver out and you start doing field sobriety tests and you realize that, they also failed the field sobriety test. And then the river would be, you do a PBT and they blow a 0.12 on the PBT, very obviously over the legal limit. And then the entire hand, or the way that the situation plays out, fits very neatly within the pocket cards that you have. When you have a pretextual reason for a stop, like what Wren tells us about the officer's pretextual reason, as long as they have an actual violation that they see, then it doesn't matter what's in their mind. Well, stopping on a pretext is where you're kind of like, this is not a real strong thing, but I'm looking for something, right? I'm looking for something. Okay, well, I've got this pair of 3s. It's a pair, but if anything else comes out on the board, even another pair that's a little bit higher, it's going to beat my 3s. But you may get up there and your pair of 3s may turn into a full house when you get to the flop. And so the approach to the car is the flop. And so the officer gets up there and they stop them for this weak pair of 3s, right? You guys follow me, right? Get up there, you stop him for this weak pair of 3s, and all of a sudden you got 2 more 3s on the flop. Oh my gosh, you smell odor of marijuana, you smell alcohol, and now you can build a hand. Well, when you stop somebody for pretextual reasons and you don't actually observe a traffic violation, and you get up to the car and you get to the flop and you try to just convince the person in the car that there is a violation when there isn't one, that's kind of like going all in and bluffing when all you have is a 7-2 offsuit as pocket cards. And that's what we have in today's video. So the video comes to us from a channel I'd never heard of before, but it's called SKPD Copwatch, and it features a traffic stop that happened in Charlestown, Rhode Island. So I don't want to get too much into it. We're just going to start it and let the video speak for itself, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the legal points along the way. Let's check it out.
Hello. How are you?
Can I ask why you pulled me over?
Yeah, you can't stop here. This
Why?
is a stopping place is prohibited. So you pulled yourself over.
On the shoulder, right?
Yeah, but emergency purposes only. So
how do you know I'm not in an emergency situation? Did you ask if I was in an emergency situation?
You haven't let me say anything yet.
How do you know that I'm not like pulling over to safely use my cell phone?
Well, that wouldn't be an emergency.
So you're saying that it's illegal to pull over in the shoulder? Can you tell me what law that is?
So this is emergency stopping only?
This is not an emergency stopping only.
It is.
It's absolutely not.
This is called places prohibited.
You cannot tell me that pulling over on the shoulder of
you.
the highway is prohibited.
It is.
It's absolutely not. What statute is that?
I can't.
If you were go write me. I want you to write me a ticket for stopping on the shoulder of a highway.
I don't want to write you.
No,
anything.
I want you to write me a ticket for that because I'd like to go to court and see tell a judge why you wasted my time and his.
Okay. First of all, I'm Sergeant.
Hold on, no. Tell me the statute that says that I can't stop on the shoulder of a highway.
I don't know it off the top of my head.
Go look it up. Go look it up. I'll wait right here while you go look it up. Go call your supervisor. I want a supervisor right now.
You want the supervisor?
I want the supervisor right now.
Okay, so this is already right off the bat, just complete gaslighting, right? Why did you pull me over? Well, because you can't stop here. Okay, why? Well, because this is stopping for emergencies only. Do you know if I'm having an emergency? Well, you haven't let me say anything yet. Bro, you made the stop. You turned on the lights. You approached the car. The idea that you didn't know what you were going to say to the driver is based 100% on the fact that you know they didn't do anything illegal. And you just wanted to go on a fishing expedition, and they've immediately called you out. And that's the issue that you're having. And so this officer, instead of just being like, you know what, man, you're right. I just saw you pulled over and I was stopping to check on you. No, couldn't do it. The ego would not allow it. Let's continue.
All right. So I'm Sergeant Lupacino. I am the supervisor.
I want your lieutenant. I want your major. Call your captain.
All right. So, major, captain, those don't exist.
I want all of them. I want your chief. I want your chief. Get him on the phone and tell him that you stopped a vehicle for pulling over safely on the shoulder of the highway.
Okay. I didn't stop you. You pulled over yourself.
So this isn't even a traffic stop? So why are your lights on behind me then?
Okay. What is a traffic stop now? Okay. My lights are on for our safety so no one hits us. Does that make sense?
No, because how many cars have passed us since we've been here?
Well, none right now, but we got one on their way.
You've absolutely no logic behind your reasoning.
Okay. So just to clear some things up, because I'm sure you guys already know that a traffic stop under the Fourth Amendment jurisprudence that everybody sort of observes is a Terry stop. And under the standard articulated in Terry versus Ohio, the officer, in order to conduct an investigatory detention, has to have reasonable articulable suspicion. That is, suspicion that is articulable based on some individualized facts, not just a hunch, not just, I think this guy's up to no good. And there's a specific thing that this person is doing that leads me to believe that criminal activity is afoot. Now, you don't have to have a very specific crime. Like, you don't necessarily have to know that the person is committing crime A, but you could be suspicious based on his behavior and the circumstances that, you know, this person is committing one of 5 things that are criminal in nature, right? So the cop's articulation here is based on a misunderstanding of Rhode Island law. Now, keep in mind that this is Charlestown, Rhode Island, so you have municipal codes that might be at play, but all of the municipal codes, with the exception of one, parallel Rhode Island state law. So just to get it out of the way, I'll tell you that the Charlestown Municipal Code prohibits parking on the shoulder of the road at any time. Parking is not specifically defined under the ordinance. So generally when this sort of stuff is discussed, it's discussed in the context of stopping, standing, and parking. Stopping is like when a bus stops to let somebody on or off. Or you drop your wife off at the front of the Walmart because she's too precious to endure the rain, and then you go park and you walk in the rain because you gave her the umbrella because you're a nice person. Not that that's ever happened to me or that I'm disgruntled about it anyway. But that's the definition of like stopping. Standing is a little more extended. I would say it's closer to what this gentleman is doing. But parking is generally observed as leaving the vehicle altogether for some period of time, meaning you leave it unattended completely. The Charlestown ordinance specifically outlaws parking, but parking is not what we have here. We have something that is a hybrid between stopping and standing. So now that we got past that, we can eliminate the Charlestown ordinance because he is not parked on the shoulder. Now we got to get into Rhode Island law. And if you listen to what the officer's saying, he's actually quoting the state law because he's talking about stopping and standing and parking being prohibited in certain places. And so let's pull up the Rhode Island statute and we'll take a look. There are a couple different ones that may or may not be in play depending on what we have going on. So 3121.1 is stopping on a traveled portion of open highway prohibited. Now, he stopped on an area that is the shoulder of the road. So the traveled portion, not in play here. So this statute doesn't matter. Under 3121-4, it says places where parking or stopping prohibited. This is what the officer is referring to. So when we get in here under subsection A, it says, no person shall stop, stand, or park, so it covers all three, a vehicle, except when necessary to avoid conflict with other traffic or in compliance with the law or the directions of a police officer or traffic control device in any of the following places. Now keep in mind that it had this provision for in compliance with the law. So to the driver's point, when he says, how do you know that I wasn't pulling over to make a phone call? Because you can't use an on hands-free device in most states now. So the only way to comply with the law when you need to make a phone call is to pull over. So that's the point. So we already don't have a law being broken here probably, but still, this law outlines enumerated places where you can't stop or stand or park. And none of those places, if you haven't figured it out, are going to include the shoulder of a regular part of the highway. But let's take a look. On a sidewalk, okay, doesn't apply. In front of a public or private driveway, doesn't apply. Within an intersection, within 8 feet of a fire hydrant, on a crosswalk, within 20 feet of a crosswalk or intersection, within 30 feet upon the approach to any flashing beacon, stop sign, or traffic control device, located at the side of the roadway, between a safety zone and the adjacent curb, within 30 feet of points of the curb immediately opposite, within 50 feet of the nearest rail of a railroad crossing, within 20 feet of the driveway entrance to the fire station, that doesn't apply. Alongside or opposite any street excavation or obstruction when stopping, standing, or parking would obstruct traffic. On the roadway side of any vehicle stopped or parked at the edge or curb of a street. Okay, so that would be like in the road. Upon any bridge or other elevated structure upon a highway or within a highway tunnel, that's not in play. At any place where official signs prohibit stopping, okay, that might matter. At any curb, cut, or ramp for persons with disabilities, that ain't it. On any bicycle lane, trail, or path, that ain't it. Upon any cross-hatched access aisle adjacent to disability parking spaces. So none of these places that the officer's citing apply to this scenario. But there's one more law, so let's take a look at that. Under 3121.10, we have a restriction on parking on state highways, and it says the State Traffic Commission, with respect to highways under its jurisdiction, may place signs prohibiting or restricting the stopping, standing, or parking of any vehicles on any highways where, in its opinion, as evidenced by resolution or order entered in its minutes, such stopping, standing, or parking is dangerous to those using the highway, or where the stopping, standing, or parking of vehicles would unduly interfere with the free movement of traffic on it. The signs shall be official signs, and no person shall stop, stand, or park any vehicle in violation of the restrictions stated on the signs. So there's a process. There has to be like a resolution approved. There has to be minutes. There has to be documentation. There has to be official signs created, and they are placed strategically. Well, we know from the conversation that we're getting ready to listen to that that's not the case.
You just saw me driving, got in behind me. I pulled over so you could pass me. That's why I pulled over, because I was driving under the speed limit, and I knew you were trying to find a reason to pull me over. So I pulled over to allow you to pass me because I'm not breaking any traffic laws.
Well, you did by pulling over.
I absolutely did not by turning on my turn signal and pulling over.
Yes,
you're saying that it's against the law to turn on your turn signal and safely pull over on the edge of the highway.
What I'm telling you.
You didn't even ask if it was an emergency situation. You just came over and said you
didn't let me get to that.
I didn't know. I asked you. I absolutely asked you. Now you're trying to backtrack. Are you wearing a body camera?
Of course I have a body camera on.
Great.
I think it is great.
At this point, I'm going to use my Fifth Amendment right to silence, and I'm not going to answer any questions.
You're not going to answer any questions. Okay. Well, this isn't a question about being for criminal purposes. First, you mentioned emergency. Are you okay? Do you need any type of rescue? Do you need any type of services?
Am I free to go?
No.
Am I free to go?
I just told you that.
Am I free to go?
I'll answer it again. No.
Am I free to go?
Okay. No. Do you need anything?
No. Am I free to go?
So interesting dynamic here. The officer says, well, it wasn't a traffic stop, but now it is. And obviously that doesn't work because it would have been fine for the police officer. It's generally accepted for a police officer observing anybody who's pulled over on the side of the road to pull up behind them, turn on their lights, and check on what would be called like a disabled vehicle or a stranded motorist or whatever to try to make sure that this person's okay. Well, the officer didn't do that. And it's very obvious that he didn't do that. He had a pretext. That's why he stopped the car. And so what this officer has done, because we just heard the driver say, look, I observed that you were following behind me. I knew you were looking for a reason to pull me over. I pulled over so that you would pass or pull me over. Well, he called the bluff. That's what happened. The officer's sitting here with a 7-2 offsuit, his pocket cards. He's observed no violation. And so now his play is, oh my God, I'm going to go all in with no cards, having no idea what I'm going to find on the flop. The problem is he has no violation whatsoever. None. And trying to make it seem like a violation or trying to turn it into a violation where there wasn't a legal basis for the stop to begin with is going to nullify all the cards he's going to see on the flop turn in the river because he's going to lose the entire hand because he didn't have a reason to stop him in the first place. And that's what we have going on here. But it's going to get even worse because he's actually going to pull this guy out of the car and make it even worse for himself, which of course would be pursuant to Pennsylvania versus Mimms if we had a valid traffic stop, which we don't have. So we're going to go over Mimms here in just a second after we see this guy get pulled out of the car.
All right, I need your license.
What's the reason for the traffic stop?
Okay. Place is prohibited.
I am willing to go to jail over this. Are you willing to escalate it to that? If you want me to get out of the car and place my hands behind my back because I will not... No, you don't need to get me out of the car. I'll get out of the car on my own.
Okay, I didn't say you wouldn't.
Just make sure I have everything. Turn this off. Get some keys.
I just need you to walk to the rear of your car for me.
No, nope. Take this all the way. I want you to take this all the way. You might have turn my recording on. Just turn my recording on. I just
need you to step to the back of your car.
I don't understand why I'm here.
Okay, I don't understand why you're doing this.
Because he got me out of my car.
I've been here the whole time. I know what he's doing.
Do you have any weapons on you, sir?
There's no reason for this.
Okay.
Okay.
There's absolutely no reason for me to be out of the car right now.
I think I told you a couple times.
Okay? All I did was safely pull over on the shoulder of the highway.
Okay.
You realize that, right?
I know where we are.
Okay.
Right. What I need you to do, turn around, look at me. Put your butt on the bumper of your car. You are detained. Again, Sergeant Lupacino.
For what?
Okay.
What crime do you suspect me of committing? What is your reasonable, articulable suspicion of a crime?
There is no crime. It is a traffic violation.
You're saying it is a traffic violation to pull over on the shoulder of the highway. What is the go? I want you to tell me what Rhode Island statute that is.
Okay. I told you, place is prohibited.
Where? Where does it say?
Just because you can't see the sign
where does it say any? There's no sign. There's no sign anywhere.
On Route 1, yes, there is.
There's no sign anywhere.
I'm going to shut your door, sir.
Stopping prohibited. There's no sign anywhere.
It says emergency stopping only.
I've lived in this state for 33 years. There is no sign on this highway that says you can't pull over on the highway.
Just hang out with him for a minute.
I get a lot of misleading information in the comment section on Mimms. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you guys, but you really just don't understand Mimms. And you really do need to understand Mimms because a lot of people draw this line in the sand based on a flawed understanding of Mimms. And they think that as a result of what they perceive to be a violation of Mimms, they're going to get this big lawsuit. And it's not going to happen in most cases because most people have a misunderstanding. Mimms does not require a subjective fear that the person is armed and dangerous. It doesn't. It also doesn't require that the officer articulate anything to the person as to why they're getting them out. Remember, the officer's subjective reasoning is something that they only have to articulate to the court. But just to prove it, because I don't want to get into ideological arguments with people who think they know everything, I'm going to read the Mimms opinion so that you can see it in text for yourself. So Mimms had two holdings. And so we'll just go down here to where it says held. Number one, the first holding, the order to get out of the car issued after the respondent was lawfully detained was reasonable and thus permissible under the Fourth Amendment. The state's proffered justification for such order, the officer's safety, is both legitimate and weighty, and the intrusion into respondent's personal liberty occasioned by the order being at most a mere inconvenience cannot prevail when balanced against legitimate concerns for officer safety. And if you go down and you look through more of the opinion and you listen to what they actually say, they're talking about this Philadelphia police officer who does this as a matter of course, routinely. He asks people out of the car and he asks them to stand on the passenger side of the car. And his reasoning was that he feels safer. In other words, it's a precaution for officer safety. It is not that the officer has to have a subjective fear. It's just, and you have to go through, and I'm not going to read the whole opinion, but the holding is what matters. And then you can go through and you can read the opinion for yourself, because I'll leave it in the description, and you can listen to what they're actually saying. Now, the most compelling part of Mimms is actually the dissent, because it tells us all of the things that are going to happen as a result of the court getting this case wrong. And it absolutely has done exactly what the dissent warned against. But there's also a second holding in Mimms, and that's where people get confused, because the second holding in Mimms deals with the pat down. Because what happened in this stop is Harry Mimms is pulled over for like an expired registration or something, and then they approach the car, and then when they ask Mimms to get out of the car, the officer notices a bulge in Mimms' jacket, and then he pats Mimms down and finds a gun. He believes the bulge is indicative of a person who has a weapon, so he pats down the outer clothing, and then he recovers a gun. And so the second holding in Mimms deals with the pat down. But it's not like some new rule that says that you have to believe the person is armed and dangerous in order to pat them down or ask them out of the car. So let's read the second holding in Mimms and we'll clear this up. Number 2, under the standard announced in Terry versus Ohio. Again, so this is not a new rule for Mimms. The court is throwing us back to Terry versus Ohio and reminding us under what circumstances a person can perform a Terry frisk. Whether the facts available to the officer at the moment of the seizure or the search warrant a man of reasonable caution in the belief that the action taken was appropriate. The officer was justified in making the search he did once the bulge in respondent's jacket was observed. His testimony was that as Mimms got out of the car, he noticed a bulge in his jacket. That caused him to do a pat down, and then eventually he felt something hard and reached inside the jacket, got the gun, and the court said that is fine. But it's not fine because there's a new rule in Mimms that says you have to believe they're armed and dangerous to get them out of the car. It's fine because Terry versus Ohio told us that there are 2 parts. There's a Terry stop and a Terry frisk. Terry stop is based on reasonable articulable suspicion, but a Terry frisk has to be based on some objectively reasonable information that the officer has that would lead him to believe that the person is armed and dangerous. And so all the court's saying here related to the pat down is that, yes, this is fine under the standard articulated in Terry versus Ohio. Mimms gets out, officer notices bulge, pats down. According to Terry, that's a good Terry frisk. We're moving on. And that's the real holding in Pennsylvania versus Mimms. No subjective fear, precaution for officer safety. In due course means as a matter of routine, if you ask everybody out of the car because that's where you feel safer, that is okay under Mimms. And that's the reason why these officers are continuing to just get everybody out of the car. Now, what Mimms doesn't do is it doesn't give officers carte blanche to get people out for any reason. And where we have this disconnect is that the courts have allowed the officer safety component to never be articulated to anybody, not only not on the side of the road, but not even in a courtroom. And this has been whittled down. If you gave me an hour, I could find you a case from every federal appellate jurisdiction in the country that says in some general way that police officers can ask a person out in due course. And they've sort of forgotten about the officer safety. But the actual holdings in Mimms are all about officer safety. They are not just because a police officer to intimidate somebody or show them who's boss or whatever. And that's what we actually have.
Why are you trespassing on private property at 2:30 in the morning?
There has to be a complaint. There has to be a complaint.
Right now you're fucking bugging me.
You know it because
right now
you're
bugging
clearly
me
a
over
lawyer.
this bullshit.
You're clearly a lawyer,
Look,
so you know.
You guys get 6 months of fucking training. Don't give me this bullshit that you know the law better than me.
It is about 6 and a half.
Don't give me
All right, Tim. So okay.
don't give me this fucking bullshit that
Tim.
you guys know the law like you're a
I
fucking
didn't-
lawyer.
I didn't
Because
say I did.
lawyers go to 4 years of fucking school,
I know.
then they go on to law school after
know.
that. So you're 6.5 months of training. Don't
Okay.
give you fucking shit on the law, okay?
Okay, what we do? All right, so I tried. I don't have any cell phone service. If you Google RIGL,
Am I free to go?
parking prohibited.
Am I free to go? Am I
Okay.
free to go?
Tim,
am
you'll
I
be able
free
to
to go?
find the statute.
Am I free to go? Am I free to go?
Do you need
Am
anything
I
from
free
me?
to go? No. Am I
In
free
that
to go?
case, yes.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the rest of
Bye.
your night, Tim.
Have a nice night.
Be careful
asshole.
merging back on the Route 1. I know you're concerned
Hey,
about the
hey,
heavy
buddy,
volume traffic.
Buddy, fuck you.
Gotta love that First Amendment, sir. You okay, Tim?
So again, We've clarified that we have no reasonable articulable suspicion because the thing he was doing wasn't illegal. And it wasn't reasonable for the officer to assume it was illegal. And the officer's sort of fumbling around and getting his ass kicked verbally is proof that he really just did not know how to deal with somebody who wasn't just going to immediately submit to his authority. And that's the problem that we had in this encounter. This citizen did a great job. Now, I wouldn't recommend telling him that you're willing to step out and put your hands behind your back, because he might not have been ordered out of the car had he not done that. But again, that still doesn't make it legal simply because he initiated the idea. Saying, I'm willing to go to jail over this. Are you willing to escalate it into this? That's fine, because you let the officer know, hey, this is my line. You have a choice. And so you're putting him on notice. It's not a bad strategy. It's just that you don't want to resist and fight and cause a bunch of damage to yourself. He says, oh, I don't have any service, so I couldn't look it up. No, you didn't know what you're doing. Your bluff got called. You had a 7-2 offsuit, and this guy flopped a royal flush, and you had nothing to work with from the beginning, but somebody smarter than you took control of this situation, and you had to deal with your own shame of being owned by a citizen on the side of the road, all because you expect everybody to just comply with whatever you tell them you're going to do. And you expect that everybody's just going to understand that just because you're investigating, that gives you carte blanche to do whatever the hell you want to. And that's not how it works. Pretext is fine as long as you actually have a valid traffic violation. It could be anything. And of all the crazy things that states have as reasons to pull people over, you couldn't find a single one. This guy outsmarted you, and that's where we are. It fails on the grounds of Terry because there's no reasonable articulable suspicion of any criminal activity or any traffic violation. You have articulable suspicion, but it's not reasonable. What you really had was a hunch that was non-particularized, and then the person outsmarted you. The exit order isn't lawful because Mimms doesn't apply to this case. Okay, so he had no valid reason to get him out of the car. And if he'd been paying attention, the guy was not offering to get out of the car. The guy was saying, if you want to arrest me, I'll get out of the car and put my hands behind my back. He was letting the officer know that he was not going to resist arrest and he was willing to go to jail over it. He was not saying, I'm happy to get out of the car. But the officer couldn't see past, whatever his tunnel vision was telling him. And so that's why we're here. And of course, he tries to get the ID and the guy says, no, I haven't committed a traffic violation. This is risky because, every state requires that you show your ID if you get stopped by the police. But again, this is not an actual stop. It didn't become a stop until the officer was challenged, and the officer just made it up and gaslit him and tried to get him to, be intimidated into just complying, and it just didn't work. In closing, here's the truth. Policing, like poker, is about what you can prove, not what you pretend that you have and want people to believe. And if you try to bluff your way past the Fourth Amendment, eventually someone's going to call. And when you produce your cards, you're the one who's going to be embarrassed when the flop, the turn, and the river have a bunch of stuff that doesn't match what's in your hand. And in poker, all you lose is a little bit of money and maybe a little bit of pride. But in this game that you clearly don't understand the rules to, you're going to lose your job and your reputation and your career. And if the right lawyer gets involved, you're going to lose your qualified immunity. And worst of all, you may end up being part of a highlight reel on one of these big YouTube channels that shows everybody a case study in what not to do, with you being the central figure of that video. So, know your rights. Call the bluff, especially if you got the cards. Don't back down when you've got a good hand, because they call the winning hand having the nuts for a reason. So, stand up for yourself. Make them work to prove their case, and call them out on their BS when they can't do it. Anyway, that's all for this one, guys. I just thought you'd enjoy this interaction. I'll probably have a companion blog post that I put up over on Substack, sort of having a little bit more fun with fleshing out the parallels between Texas Hold'em and this traffic stop. Please head over to Substack and check us out over there. It's absolutely free to join. It'll give you an opportunity to interact with me. Substack absolutely free. There'll be a link in the description. You can join on a paid tier if you'd like to, but obviously that's just for people who want to support the channel monetarily. If you don't enjoy blogs and you don't want to follow me to Substack, but you'd like to support the channel monetarily, I'll leave my Venmo and PayPal links both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel and leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care. Always film your interactions with the police and keep your evidence to yourself.